So there's no truth, right, that you're actually going to switch parties. Because I know Trump has offered you. I mean, you said I would be a Republican.
That's and if I ever decide to change, and I won't, I'll be have me on and I will announce that. But it's not going to. It's like I'm a committed Democrat, even though if I vote 93% of the time.
With the Democrats.
I thought we were supposed to be a big tent party. So I'm not really sure how I become an issue for any of the Democrats, just having some different views in these other issues.
That right there is the whole Democratic Party argument in one awkward, uncomfortable exchange. John Fetterman is basically saying, wait a minute, I'm still here. I still vote with you almost all the time. So why am I suddenly being treated like a traitor? And honestly, that is the question Democrats do not want to answer, because if a guy can vote with the party 93% of the time and still get treated like he is wearing a red MAGA hat under his hoodie, then maybe the party's problem is not loyalty. Maybe the problem is ideological control.
I mean, you used the term an orgy of socialism recently. You said that what you see in the Democratic Party. I do too.
Now, pause right there, because that phrase is not subtle. An orgy of socialism is not a gentle policy disagreement. That is Bill Maher looking at his own side and saying, what exactly are we doing here? And this is where it gets interesting. Maher is not some lifelong conservative talk radio host. Fetterman is not some Republican strategist. These are Democrats. These are people who, at least on paper, are supposed to be inside the tent, but the tent keeps shrinking every time someone says something the activist wing does not like.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have whether it's like the mayor in Seattle. I mean, she's absolutely a socialist in New York, and a lot of these candidates across the country, and that's really moving towards that. And people that are proud to be labeled as a socialist. That used to be was a smear when I was running my first cycle, and now it's becoming more normalized. And now I think that's a very dangerous, slippery slope for us to be.
That is the warning. Not just that socialism exists inside the Democratic Party, but that the label itself is being rebranded. What used to be political poison is now being treated like a personality type, like it is edgy, like it is brave, like it is the cool new version of caring about people. But here is the problem. Most normal voters are not sitting at the kitchen table saying, you know what this grocery bill needs? More revolutionary theory. They want lower prices. They want safer streets. They want schools that work. They want rent that does not feel like a hostage situation. So, when Democrats start sounding less like a governing party and more like a campus protest with a budget proposal, people notice. And not just Republicans. Moderates notice. Independents notice. Working class voters notice. And that is exactly why this conversation matters. So, before we go further, hit.
And now I've spoke to people that had to live under socialism and or communism, and they are morons if they think that socialism is the answer. I've lived under that, and thank God here now.
That line hits because it exposes the gap between theory and memory. There is a big difference between people who romanticize socialism from a podcast microphone and people whose families actually lived under heavy state control. For some activists, socialism is an aesthetic. It is a slogan on a tote bag. It is a way to say, I care more than you. But for people who fled those systems, it is not a vibe. It is not a social media identity. It is something they remember very differently. Now, to be fair, Maher is not saying the government should do nothing. He actually makes that clear, and this is the part that gets lost when everyone starts screaming.
We already have a great deal of socialism, and I've made the point a million times on the show, as we should. All Western democracies are quasi-socialist. There are certain things that the government should do. You don't want the private enterprise to be controlling the Marine Corps, and you need Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid. Obviously, these things, we have socialism. They're just proposing something way more than that.
Exactly. That is the difference Democrats used to understand. There is a safety net, and then there is trying to turn the entire economy into one giant government checkout counter. Nobody serious is saying abolish Social Security. Nobody serious is saying public schools should vanish tomorrow. The argument is about scale. It is about limits. It is about what happens when every problem becomes an excuse for another massive government promise. Because free always sounds amazing until the receipt shows up. Free college, free healthcare, free transit, free housing, free groceries, free everything. At some point, the word free stops being a policy and starts being a sales pitch. And voters are not stupid. They know somebody pays. Maybe it is the rich at first, then the super rich, then corporations, then small businesses, and then the middle class gets told to do its part for the greater good. Funny how the bill always finds its way downhill.
And by the way, you said socialism, dirty word? Yeah, yes and no. What really was a dirty word, which isn't anymore, is communism.
Yeah.
I mean, this woman in New York who is Mayor Mondami's right-hand woman, she tweets out, elect more communists.
This is where Maher's panic starts making sense. Because once socialist stops sounding scary, then suddenly the next word starts getting softened, too. Suddenly, communist becomes ironic. Then it becomes edgy. Then it becomes a brand, and Democrats keep acting shocked when Republicans use this stuff in attack ads. What do they expect? If someone close to a major city leader says, elect more communists, that is not a private diary entry. That is a campaign commercial gift basket. Republicans do not even have to write the ad. They just have to press play, add scary music, and let suburban voters do the rest.
So the new generation is ready for socialism. Problem is, they may be ready for a little too much socialism. Almost 2/3 of Sanders voters want free college and free universal health coverage, and no more than an extra $1,000 in taxes, even though that's not really socialism. That's Santaism.
Santaism is brutal because it is funny, and it lands. That is Maher at his best. He takes a complicated economic fantasy and reduces it to the emotional truth underneath it. People want the gifts. They do not want the bill. And look, younger Americans have real frustrations. Housing is expensive. College debt is crushing. Healthcare is a nightmare for a lot of families. Pretending those problems are imaginary is useless. But the solution cannot just be, the government will buy everything, and someone richer than you will cover it. That is not a serious governing philosophy. That is a Christmas list with a tax plan stapled to it.
And look, no one is arguing that millennials haven't gotten a rotten deal in this economy, but they've also gotten too used to getting shit for free. We've accepted that the new normal in America is people in their 20s and even 30s still on their parents' cell phone plans, healthcare plans, mom and dad still paying the car insurance, and almost 1/3 of them are still living at home.
Now, that clip is going to annoy people because Maher is doing the thing he always does. He mixes a valid point with just enough boomer grenade energy to make half the audience mad. But underneath the sarcasm, there is a real cultural argument. If people are trained to expect everything to be subsidized, forgiven, covered, paid off, or provided, then politics becomes a competition over who can promise the biggest pile of free stuff. And once that starts, nobody wants to be the adult in the room. Nobody wants to say, actually, we cannot afford that. Nobody wants to say, there are trade-offs. Because trade-offs do not go viral. Giveaways do.
To being able to sit in Starbucks all day for the price of a scone, from music to Wi-Fi to birth control, it's not such a jarring proposition when socialism comes along and says you are entitled to free stuff. And that, in turn, must be why there's this proliferation of websites like Kickstarter and GoFundMe. GoFundMe. Go fund yourself.
That last line is classic Maher. Harsh, yes. Over the top, absolutely. But that is why it cuts through. His bigger point is that the culture changed before the politics changed. First, People got used to digital life feeling basically free. Then they got used to crowdfunding personal problems. Then politics picked up that same emotional logic and said, why stop there? Free food, free buses, free rent support, free tuition, free healthcare, free everything. And again, the pitch sounds compassionate. But compassion without math is just marketing. The question is not, would these things be nice? Of course they would be nice. The question is, can you build a stable country on promises that voters do not believe they personally have to pay for?